Yes, guys, welcome back to another episode of Teams Like Brighton. There's a lot to discuss in this episode today, Richie. Arsenal, Everton, and Borough in the FA Cup. Lot of things to discuss. Shall we get the bad bit out the way?
Yeah,
There.
fine. Go on then. You kick off. What were your main takeaways from Brighton's 4-2 defeat on New Year's Eve to Arsenal?
Do you know what? Matoma's goal being disallowed for a stud being offside is just pain. That image just hurts so much. It really does. It really does. Um, it still hurts to this day. Still hurts to this day, and we're like a week into the new year, and it still hurts. But do you know what? We were getting absolutely spanked from the minute the referee blew his whistle. Arsenal were up for it, and that's largely down to City dropping points against Everton at home. Once that result was at full time and the Arsenal fans celebrated before the game, and that clearly got translated over to the Arsenal team, you just knew that we were gonna be in for a really hard match. And that was that kind of game for Arsenal where they look back on the season and go, that could be the difference between them winning the time and them losing it. So we were our job was hard enough, and the game was almost won before the game even started. So the main takeaway I'll have to say is that the mentality we had, like there was a point we were 3-0, 4-1 down, and we were still going for it. We were still fighting, and we were really putting Arsenal in the corner. That they just couldn't find an answer in the last 10, 15 minutes, which is, to me, that's fantastic from us. So that'll be my main takeaways from it. But it's a stud. It's a stud. It could have been 4-3. If that goal wasn't, if VAR didn't exist, we would be talking about a completely different result, I think.
Yeah, it would have been 7-4.
7-4. Amazing. But yeah, that is my summary of that. What about you?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a good point about, it almost killed the game, sort of Saka's goal in the second minute. It was just like we were, really up for it after a 3-1 win at Southampton. You're like, this is obviously it's a very, very tough game, but we beat Arsenal 6 weeks or so before this game in the Carabao Cup. This was, we were feeling good, and then it just the balloon, the whole energy was almost sucked out of the stadium with that second minute goal. I think Lamptey, looking back on it, probably should have cleared rather than trying to run it out from his own box, and he got tackled obviously then a couple of deflections. But I think after the game, Arteta said that Brighton are a tough team, but they left a lot of open spaces, which is actually something that De Zerbi disagreed with. And he said, the reason why there were open spaces later on was because Brighton were chasing the game. And I think, unfortunately, Brighton didn't really start properly playing until they were 3-0 down. And by then it was kind of too late, really. But Arsenal do look a pretty slick outfit. They, in the last sort of 25 minutes, they definitely took their foot off the gas and let Brighton back in. But Matoma was really, really good. Evan Ferguson, obviously 18-year-old, got his first Premier League goal. So massive credit to him. He showed really good strength to just shrug off, Saliba, who's not exactly a little chap. He's, I think, like 6'4" and biceps the size of Bournemouth. So he showed good strength there and a nice little finish to slot it under Ramsdale. And like you say, what might have been if that Matoma goal had been given. But I think I wouldn't say it was like this was a free hit, because obviously Brighton have shown that they can beat anyone on their day. But I think, to come back to get 4-2, put a bit more respectability on the scoreline. But I think, the first 50 minutes to be 3-0 down wasn't really good enough. But as far as responses go, talk about something a bit more jolly. The Everton response, Tom, was fantastic.
Sensational. It was definitely worth the 9-hour round trip. for many Brighton fans, as we said. Um, uh, I I couldn't get over how just how we read the game, not from just from the tactical sense of how prepared we were, but the moment that the team just read how Everton were laid up and they saw the weaknesses and they just pounced on it so quickly, and it just left the defense looking around like needing answers. They just didn't know how to handle us. Matoma's goal, I was amazed at how much space and room he had in the box. Like he took a heavy touch, which he needed to, and then he took another touch, which I thought was a bit too heavy.
Yeah.
And usually in this division, you would see that get punished very quickly, and we'll be frustrated by it, but we'll be encouraged by what we've just seen. But Matoma took his chance beautifully, and March on the similar scale as well. Very much a similar goal. Just read it. The defense just stood there, just opened up the space for him that he needs, and slotted it in really nicely. Pickford was just shouting at his defense every time he conceded. Pascal Gross's goal is one of those ones where you just see they're going to be on like Footballer Howler highlights. Just the pass back to no one was something else, and Gross's take on it as well was just brilliant as well. It was just such a nice dinky little chip over Pickford, make it just to round up the game to 4-0, which was beautiful. And of course, Ferguson's got his second goal, 2-2. The guy's a clinical finisher. And at 18 years old, it is frightening to see just how good this guy is. And he didn't look out of place at all. And I tell you one thing I really liked about him was Matoma was down injured and Everton insisted on playing on. And all the Brighton guys were trying to signal for them to just take it out. And they just ignored it. So Ferguson took it upon himself to just run and just shove that player and get a yellow card. And I just thought, yes, I like that. I like that a bit about you. I want to see his mental strength, and he showed it there brilliantly. And I just thought, here we go. We've got a player here. So yeah, and I think, and a lot of us in the away end when I was watching it, were very much like, yeah, that's what we like to see. That's what we like to see. A bit of grit, bit of like, no, come on, took it on his own hands. Huh?
Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough, type thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought, yeah, good on you, lad. And he didn't look unfazed at all. It just, I look at that defense. You know, Connor Cody, James Tarkowski. They're really good defenders. These are international caps, European football behind them. Solid out and out Premier League defenders that I think anyone would be happy to have in their squad. And they just didn't have an answer for him. They couldn't give him a quiet game at all. And if they tried, he had about 2 or 3 different answers to it. So he kept his defense. Well, I wouldn't say they kept his defenders on their toes because they were just sitting ducks all game. They were so open. And I loved every minute of it. I'm still tired from Everton away, by the way, in case you didn't realise. I am so tired from that. It still puts a smile to my face. I mean, that kind of performance makes any journey of that magnitude worth it. Absolutely 100% worth it. So can't argue with that. What about your takes?
Yes, I think the first half was obviously a much more even affair. Actually, Sanchez, who I think we said in the past, has got an error in him. I don't think he was at his best against Arsenal. Maybe could have done better for 2 of the goals.
I agree with that.
He made a good low save fairly early on to stop Iwobi at 0-0, sort of diving to his left. So I was like, that's hopefully a good confidence booster for him. And then it was a kind of toing and throwing affair, and then Caicedo, it was an interesting one. So obviously he did that crossfield pass to Matoma, but Patterson, I think, misjudged the flight of the ball. he thought he could
Yep.
sort of intercept it, and then it sort of maybe skidded off the pitch and he was out of position. And then, yeah, that Matoma touch initially, like, whoa, that's a big touch. But it actually set him up nicely. And then I think the centre-backs, Cody and Tarkowski, were very, very deep. And then he just did another touch, which again looked a little bit overhit, but then it was fine and he slotted it away nicely. But yeah, obviously the real killer blow was Brighton scoring 3 goals in 6 minutes in the second half. I didn't even actually finish because I was on the live blog and then obviously tweeting. So I didn't finish, I think, after March's 3rd goal. I hadn't finished rounding up that before Gross had scored. So I was like, oh. But yeah, that was, obviously 4-0. And then it was a prickly atmosphere all night, I'd say. Obviously, Everton now in the relegation zone, but we're just above it. Lots of sack the board chants, real, boos towards their players for their performance. And yeah, to see De Kaiser just dinking it over beautifully was really good to see. But the slight blemish at the end, obviously, to concede that penalty. And I think, sadly, Sanchez and Estupiñán were a bit at fault for not being a bit more authoritative in terms of, I'm clearing this. They both had, I think, chances maybe to do better. And then obviously Sanchez fouled. I can't remember actually who he fouled, but Gray scored the penalty. But yeah, really, really positive performance in the second half. De Zerbi actually said he wasn't happy with the first half. But yeah, I think just going back to the 4th goal, yeah, you mentioned sort of, in the bloopers or whatever. From start to finish, it was actually comedy of errors because McNeil well overhits the cross. And then I think Estupiñán just about gets to a 50-50 before, but the Everton player, instead of going for the ball, tries to shoulder barge Estupiñán off the ball. He does shoulder barge him, but he doesn't get to the ball. And then Guay, the Everton midfielder, just I have no idea what he was thinking. Well under hit. Pickford's like, oh crap, and then legs it back, and then comes forward again. And then he takes out Tarkowski after Gross chips over him. It was just like, run the Benny Hill music. It was just absolute parody. So, yeah, a fantastic response. Just before I throw it back to you, Tom, you've been maybe quite prescient in this because you've always been on the Pascal Gross hype. You've always backed him. You've always said that he's been great. And I think you are being 100% proven right because I'd say, basically a year ago, Brighton were away at West Brom in the 3rd round of the FA Cup. And Gross was not playing much. And he started against West Brom and he played pretty well. But there was talk of him, running out his contract, being released as a free agent last summer. And then the turnaround in sort of I can't quite remember where it sort of exactly clicked in for him. But basically from, I'd say at least kind of April onwards from last year, he's just been fantastic. He's scored loads of goals. He scored 6 goals this season, 3 assists. He De Zerbi joked that he can play anywhere, like even goalkeeper, because he's just so versatile and he said he's, him and the likes of Lallana and these experienced players are the secret of Brighton because they're so valuable to the younger players, but also just they can play anywhere and they just consistently do a job. So, Tom, sorry for ever doubting him. Why is Pascal Gross so good to you?
I love it. I was loving a lot of fans were saying the same thing last night. Not last night, Everton. The fact that Gross has proven us wrong, and I'm just there. Pascal Gross, bloody good. He incredibly creative. I nearly went off that then. He supports the wingers. He He creates key chances time and time again. He's a threat on goal if you give him the chance. He's got great crossing ability. He's a great asset in set pieces. He's just an all-round really good midfielder. But just because he can't run at the same pace as Matoma or any other FIFA player with 90 plus pace rating, because that's all what seems to be the case with most people on social media, people automatically think he's not going to have a good game. But he's
Yeah,
such
that's
a
spot on.
good,
That's such a good point about the pace thing. It's just like if he's not quick,
yeah.
so people are so quick to judge.
It does my head in the fact that someone of Gross's ability doesn't even need pace. He can walk around that pitch, and so long as he has the ball, he has space, and he's got plays in front of him. He can play that ball that needs to be played. He can read the game far better than any player on the pitch at any given time. I think the only people that can actually do better than him is probably Kevin De Bruyne, Rodri, and Phil Foden, all of which are Manchester City. I honestly think that he is probably one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. And I know probably some people will laugh at me at that, but I see him week in, week out, and I see something in him where I just think you're formidable. You are just indispensable. And he has been. I think we've got him for like 3 million, and he's a bargain. He's been a bargain. He's the reason that we stayed up in the first season. He's the reason that we stayed up in the second season. And he's been the reason why we have been so good moving forward and breaking ourselves from lower table, mid-table to a top 10 Premier League side now. And I have no doubt that he's going to be the reason why we could well end up in Europe at the end of this season. And if he gets injured, then that's a big gap that we're going to miss there, because he's such a brilliant asset. And when we have a fully fit midfield, I mean, he could rotate with Lallana, and when you think like, okay, Lallana's job's okay, Gross is on, you're still going to get excited with what's in front of us, because he's such a good and technically brilliant midfielder, and that's exactly what you need. So yes, apology accepted. You are forgiven. Every other Brighton fan who wanted him gone last season is forgiven.
Good stuff. One person, just continue on from Gross, and he spoke very highly about, and the player that you talked about earlier, Tom, Evan Ferguson. So he is very excited, and so are many, including the fans, about this 18-year-old kid who has personally said he feels comfortable at this Premier League level, which is fantastic. 2 goals in 2 games. He's showing real all-round qualities in terms of, we know he's very strong on the ball, but he also showed that he's got an eye for goal. He's not afraid to shoot on goal. Like in the Everton game, he had that sort of instinctive left-footed shot where he just sort of stuck out his leg and it hit the post, and that was very, very unlucky. Really, really good first-time snapshot. And then there was a few options ahead of him, I think, when Brighton were breaking forward, but he looked up, took a touch, 25 yards out, nearly top corner, absolute pile driver of a strike, and then he was in the right place at the right time to take his goal. And I mean, Tom, would you, obviously Brighton fans have been looking for the sort of the Glenn Murray, the heir apparent to Brighton's king, and they were, Mopé obviously did a good job, 27 goals or so in all competitions, but in more than 100 games. Glenn Murray scored, I think, 13 goals in the 2018-2019 season. It's, we don't want to put too much pressure on him, and obviously it's important to let him develop and stuff like that. But do you think maybe further down the line, someone like Ferguson, who has got so much to his game seemingly for someone so young, do you think he could fill those shoes, or do you think it's maybe too soon to say?
He's got all the right. He's ticking all the right boxes for me. He really is. So I think he needs to be well nurtured and well cared for, and I think that's the case at Brighton. He's definitely doing that at the moment. So I think we're going to be in a position where we could be really, really excited with what we have at our disposal. He could well be the answer for us for that number 9 out and out striker. He has that physicality that was since Glenn Murray left, but he also has that pace and power that we haven't seen at the club really in a very, very long time. Like the strength that he has, as well as like I say, like the pace that he has and the way he can battle people, he could take players on as well is fantastic. So he's an all-round. He has the potential to be a complete forward, which is a really rare breed in the beautiful game. So we've got to do everything right. I mean, he's only 2-3 months ago he turned 18, so he could easily be described as a wonder kid, but we've got to make sure that his feet are firmly on the ground. He does all the right things, and we learn the lessons from past potential youth players that haven't done the trick with Evan Ferguson completely.
Yeah, I think yes, good points there. I think it's interesting because it's sort of opened up for him in the sense that initially you were thinking, obviously Danny Welbeck, who started the season well but didn't obviously score any goals, but was part of the kind of he was key to sort of Brighton's high pressing game and win the ball out the pitch under Potter at the start of the season and putting some really kind of good all like team selfless performances. But obviously we needed the goals. Der Sundav has not hit the ground running at all since moving from Union SJ. He's admitted to struggling a bit. Trossard's obviously been used on a couple of occasions as a false 9. Sometimes with very good effect, sometimes sometimes not so much, as we saw against Southampton and Arsenal. And obviously he was an unused substitute against Everton. But with Welbeck's injury, but obviously actually Welbeck will be back fit now for the Middlesbrough game, which is good. But it seems like there's this opportunity has opened up for him, and he's putting his hand up, saying, "I'm taking it." So I spoke to former Brighton under-18 coach Mark Beard, who compared him to no other than the young Duncan Edwards. One of the Busby Babes from Manchester United 1950s, because I think he was called the Tank, but he was also so versatile. He had great energy, great stamina, and obviously that's some massive praise, but he rates him very, very highly. And I think we don't want to see, no offense to him, we don't want to see a sort of an Aaron Connolly where, a very young player comes on the scene, does well, and then doesn't go as well, sadly. But he's such an exciting prospect, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets more game time going forward now that Welbeck is back.
And joining us is Craig Johns, who is the Middlesbrough reporter up north. Craig, how are you doing?
Well, thanks, lads. Thanks for having me on. Hope you're both well.
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Let's go straight into business then. So let's talk about Michael Carrick and Middlesbrough. Just how much of an impact he had in that Borough squad.
It's been massive. He's had 10 games in charge so far, and he's won 7 of them. But to put into context just how big the turnaround has been, 7 of those 10 games have been away from home as well. So he's not really had those home comforts. And, prior to his arrival, I think Middlesbrough had won 1, maybe 2 away games since March. And he's come in, and as I say, I think they've won 2 at home, so 5 of the 7 away games he's managed to get a win in. And in terms of the way that they're playing, the belief, the confidence in the squad, but also finding different ways to win games. They've had games like Blackpool where they played a brand of football where they absolutely dominated that match and won very comfortably on the evening at Blackpool. But then they've had games like Birmingham, like Blackburn recently, where they've fallen behind, or they've had it a bit tougher in the game as they did at Birmingham, and they've had to kind of really work hard and dig deep, grit the teeth to find an alternative way to win, essentially. And they've got that spirit and that belief and that composure, which I think it's a reflection of Michael Carrick in the way that he was as a player as well. You might remember, the sit in midfield, the calm and composed in possession kind of player. His Middlesbrough team kind of exude that same kind of composure. And there's been so many good stories within that. I mean, Chubarak Pomu is now being linked to quite a few Premier League clubs, is currently the Championship top scorer, and Michael Carrick came in and immediately dropped him into a deeper role. He kind of plays behind the main centre forward now, having spent his whole career as a centre forward, and his transformation under Carrick has been incredible. Tommy Smith at right back, experienced head, barely got a look in, really. He came in the summer on a free transfer to be a backup, really, but he's played every minute under Carrick and been so integral to what they've done. And all over the pitch, there's little success stories like that where it's really clicking, individuals are shining, and it's been quite impressive to see how well he's handled his first managerial role.
So great. Yeah, lots of interesting points there. Is there... Obviously, it's like a very short period of time, so not too much can maybe be gauged from it. But do you think that this will be more than just like an early managerial bounce? Do you see Carrick maybe, being just the thing that can maybe launch Middlesbrough back into the Premier League?
That's obviously certainly the hope. I mean, the one caution that we've got here at Middlesbrough is, we have had this before. About the same time last year, we were also excited about Chris Wilder and the direction that he was taking Middlesbrough. And he also came in and kind of quickly established a similar kind of style to the one that he had at Sheffield United that had proven so successful there. And, Middlesbrough quickly settled into that and looked comfortable playing that style. And of course, went on an incredible FA Cup run last season, which helped the climb up the table as well. And it all kind of, collapsed under Chris Wilder. But a lot of that was more to do with what was happening off the pitch. There was speculation linking him with other jobs, and which he didn't really kill. And then in the summer, there was a lot of kind of off-field issues with the recruitment team here, where he wanted to go in one direction, but his recruitment team wanted to go in another, and fractions started to appear, which clearly worked their way onto the pitch. And before Michael Carrick came in with Middlesbrough 21st in the Championship, just 1 point above the relegation zone. And that was, because of the terrible start of the season under Chris Wilder, where it just felt like there was so much division and so much, so many fractions that filtered onto the pitch, and there was a lack of belief and a lack of confidence in the players. Carrick's come in and completely turned that around. And, as you say, there is that caution that could happen again, and this could just be a new manager bounce, but it feels different than just a new manager bounce. There is a clear identity, kind of developing. There is a good squad of players there. We mentioned they were 21st and just 1 point above the relegation zone in the Championship when Carrick came in. But actually, before the season started, they were third favourites, I believe, with the in the betting markets to be promoted, because everybody did appreciate that this was a good group of players, and they'd shown that in the previous season under Chris Wilder. So I think Carrick's really just come in and instilled belief in the players again, instilled a composure among them, and clearly they are listening and taking his ideas on board, because the way that they implement pretty much everything that he sees is impressive. And there's times in games where he switches things up as well. He's not afraid to do that. He'll tell you at full time that at half time he saw this, and so he changed this, and you see that clearly taking shape on the pitch. And I think the fact that he's got that ability to do that as well is there's so many encouraging signs to suggest that this is more than just that kind of new manager bounce.
And while we're on the subject of Carrick again, a lot of things have been said about the style of play he's implemented at Borough. Could you give us an insight in terms of how much that has changed and what we can expect on Saturday?
Yeah, so in terms of, as I say, under Chris Wilder, Middlesbrough played very similar to to his Sheffield United model that got them up into the Premier League, and first season worked wonders there. So it was a back three, really forward thinking and progressive fullbacks, and it was very tick-a-tacker and patient in the approach of ball on the ground and playing it around to work into good areas. So admittedly, it was actually the interim coach Leo Perkovic who took charge of 5 games before Carrick replaced Wilder. He changed Middlesbrough and went back to a back 4, which Carrick has continued. And the kind of play it's I guess you would call it a 4-2-3-1, because as I mentioned earlier, Chuba Akpom kind of drops very deep, and he almost plays in this role in the midfield, in the hole between the midfield and the attack, where he kind of links that. But it's so fluid. There's many times we'll talk to Carrick about tactics and about formation, and he's quite big on not being kind of tied down to positions in a traditional sense. So it's very kind of fluid in terms of it quite quickly can look like a back 3 again, because Tommy Smith, who I mentioned earlier as well, will tuck in and almost make a back 3 there, allowing Ryan Giles, who's on loan from Wolves at left back, to get really far forward. And then you tend to have Riley McGree, who, when you're looking at it in a team sheet perspective, would be your left winger, but he floats inside so often and gets involved, gets close to the striker. Lately it's been Marcus Force, but there's also Isaiah Jones, who quite often hugs the right wing and looks to do things there. And then they've had different strikers, and there's a lot more now. As I said, I think the big change, they still like to play the ball on the ground a lot. They still like to control possession and be very positive while doing that. But I think if, for football manager fanatics out there like myself, I think you would probably call Carrick's kind of tactics more vertical tick-a-tacker. It's very much, the look to get the ball forward a lot quicker than Wilder's more patient approach.
And Craig, on from Middlesbrough's perspective, can you just run us through some of the team news for Middlesbrough, and also who are, I guess, the main danger men that Brighton should be really worried about? You've touched upon a few players, but if you can narrow it down maybe to 1 or 2.
Yeah, so in terms of team news, I think Matt Clark, who you'll be aware of at Brighton, is probably going to miss the game. He's been out since October with a bad back. He's suffering from nerve damage in his back, so he's been back in training apparently this week. But Carrick doesn't want to rush him back with it having so long out. And then Anthony Dijksteel is kind of a long-term injury who won't be involved, but. Carrick's had very much a settled team, really. He made one change after his first game when they lost at Preston North End, and beyond that went, I think it was 6, possibly 7 games where he then kept the same 11. Just lately, he's been tinkering a little bit more, and it will be interesting to see what he does for the Brighton game in terms of, whether he sticks with roughly the same team. He's talked about, that dilemma of wanting to kind of keep a good rhythm and momentum that they've got going at the minute. With also, there's many players in the team who, are good players. I think of Paddy McNair, a Northern Ireland international, who he's played 1 minute under Carrick so far. He's been, on the bench and not able to get on because the 2 centre-backs, Dale Fry and Darrell Lenihan, have done so well. So Paddy McNair and players like that haven't been able to get on, but this might be an opportunity to give them a bit more game time. So it will be interesting to see how he goes with his team selection when that comes out at 2:00 on Saturday afternoon. In terms of danger man, I get the impression that he won't change too much. He might make a couple of changes, but in general, he's going to, take the game quite seriously and look to be as positive as possible. So I think, I've mentioned it before, and he's the championship top scorer at the moment. But Chuba Akpom, there's so much more to his game than just goals at the moment. As I see, he floats in that hole between midfield and attack. and Middlesbrough hit him quite often with the ball, and he's so comfortable in trapping that, and then turning, holding off defenders, linking up play, advancing Borough further. And I think that could be quite important against Brighton, who obviously Premier League team. I know they're away from home, but they're going to be, Brighton have a very good style of play as well, and will no doubt want to come to the Riverside, dominate the ball, and really let their quality shine, because they are obviously going to have more quality on the pitch than Borough. So, a player like Tubrak Pom, who also has plenty of quality and can protect the ball, and maybe keep Brighton off it, and maybe stop them building so much momentum and rhythm to their game. He could be key for Middlesbrough on Saturday afternoon.
It's funny you talk about so much about Chuba Akpom, because I remember him on loan 5 years ago, and he was awful. So it's really interesting to hear how he's really changed the style of play. Like he very much gave me the impression of an out-and-out striker, and not someone that plays sort of that number 10 role. So it'll be interesting to see how he does play against his former employers. But yeah, Craig, look, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it and your insight. We'll finish it off with a score prediction from you.
It's a tough one. As I say, last season Middlesbrough had such a good cup run. They knocked out Manchester United and Tottenham, and gave Chelsea quite a good game in the quarterfinals as well. But I think this season, I think there probably is going to be a bit more of an appreciation that the league has to be a priority. I think they will make a couple, but not too many changes. But I think Brighton will just have too much quality. So I'll go for a narrow Brighton win, maybe a 2-1. Hopefully Borough just, give a good account of themselves on the day. But I think Brighton's quality will show through on the day. So 2-1 Brighton.
I've got a feeling it'll be a 2-1 Brighton win as well. Richie, what about you?
Clean sweep, baby.
2-1 all round. Brilliant stuff. That's a full house there. Well, Craig, thank you so much again. Enjoy the match. And all the best. I hope you enjoy the rest of Borough's season as well.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us, lads. And safe travels to you guys if you're coming up, and all the rest of the Brighton fans.
Cheers, Craig. Take care.